Hi, everybody. It's Colleen, and I'm back with Haggie Reads for You on Haggie Shack Radio, simulcast to Wolf Spirit Radio. And I'm going to pick up where I left off last time with the book I, the Unspeakable, found on Gutenberg.org. Apollo was smiling. Pour water over that smile, and immediately a film of ice would form. "A spy," said Apollo, looking into my open eyes. "Another damn spy." I shook my head. Ridiculous. But that's what I did. The movement pulled at the wound in the back of my neck, and a sharp pain starting there shot through my whole body. I grimaced and groaned. Apollo laughed, then suddenly brought his club hard across my face. My cheekbone seemed to be making a crunching sound. "A spy, a damn spy," said Apollo. "We got a confession for you to sign," said the crane. Apollo said, "Shut up, not yet. We got to interview him first." "Look," I said, trying to lift my head, trying to rise upon my elbows. "Call your chief. Call anybody you like. I can explain this whole thing. It's a long story." He hit me again across the other cheekbone. "Shall I describe the next timeless, endless hour? All the details? I don't remember all of them, of course. Just the moments of the sharpest pain that lifted me from the daze. Just the sound of my own screaming at times, and the helpless dryness of my own throat, and the sounds that kept coming from it, even when the vocal cords were numb. Apollo and his pals had fun. There were the electric clubs. They became so hot at the tip that they will burn through an inch of pine in a couple of seconds. They go even quicker through flesh. After a while, the smoke of my own burning flesh was thick in the room, and we all choked a little on it. They had more fun with their fists, though. They didn't burn me in the worst places. They saved them for their fists and hands. After a while, I couldn't scream. Only a hoarse, helpless, retching sound came through whenever I opened my mouth. Did I hear their voices then? I couldn't be sure whether I heard them speak or whether I dreamed that they spoke. He can't feel it any more now. That was Apollo's voice. "Wake him up again," said the crane. "Give him a shot." "Oh, hell, I'm hungry," said Apollo. "All right," said the crane. "Let's go get something to eat. We can always come back again." Blackness, sweet blackness, and the sense of floating among the stars. Nothingness. It was exquisite now. Even the touch of agony that still seeped through was exquisite. How much of this I don't know. I heard a voice again, and at first I thought my precious blackness was leaving me. I struggled to keep it. I gasped out, clutching with my mind. "Don't give up. We are coming." It was her voice, the low, seductive voice of my dreams. But I didn't want to hear it now. This was the last thing I wanted to hear. This voice had brought me here, and I never wanted to hear it again. No matter what they say, no matter what they offer you or tell you, don't give up. I fought it off. I drove it away by sheer mind power. Either that, or it stopped of itself, I don't know, and I didn't care. All I wanted was peace and blackness again, if I could find it. And then, after a while, I was awake, truly awake, and I knew this because I ached and burned all over. I could scarcely move. I lay on the table-like thing and stared at the gleaming metal ceiling, not really seeing it. "How do you feel?" said somebody. I turned my head. The somebody was sitting beside me. He was a man of about 50, thick-set and gray-haired, with skin that looked like fine porcelain. His eyes were blue, and they seemed able, intelligent. He was not exactly smiling, but his expression was pleasant. Poised was the word. Here was a man who would quietly control things wherever he would go. I said, "Lousy, and you?" Ghost of a smile. "Sorry you had to go through it. We pick the deacons because they're sadistically inclined. That makes for efficiency in the long run. Some people suffer, of course, but it's for the common good." I didn't say anything. If I had, it would have been insulting, unreasonable, blasphemous, obscene, and treasonable. So I didn't say anything. I just kept staring at him. He continued to smile. "I'm NJKF 177349, Chief of the Office of Psychological Adjustment. I'm usually simply Chief. I want you to consider me your friend, within the limits of state good, that is." I still didn't say anything. "Yours is quite a case, and of course I understand it. I think I had a quick insight into it the moment I spotted the arrest report on you. You're really lucky I happened to go through the arrest reports a while ago and got to you before the 3 deacons who interviewed you returned. They were going to interview you some more." "Yes, I'm very lucky." My voice was flat and lifeless. He leaned back easily in the chair. For all that he was thick-set, he was graceful. He was handsome. His head and deep, pleasant voice and the cut of his porcelain features all were handsome. "Trust in me," said this handsomeness. "I am a father to all men. Naturally, we want to excuse your actions and all the infractions you've committed in your rather desperate struggle for escape from your situation. Of course, we'll have to reevaluate your emotional adjustment category. It must be very low by now, and I think I'll be able to assign a new name to you and have it justified." Funny, here was the thing I'd sought and fought for, and now I had it. And this was the end of the long fight. And I didn't feel triumphant after all. I didn't even feel pleased. Funny. The chief said, "You can undoubtedly find a post suitable to a lower EAC. You can work your way up again. At least you'll be on productive status and have all the privileges that go with it." "Yes," I said, "I suppose." "So there's really nothing to worry about now, is there?" "No, I suppose not." "There's just one thing that I'd like to get into before I take the steps necessary to get you on your feet again." Even his magnificent poise couldn't conceal the feather touch of slyness then. "One little thing?" I asked. The pain was with me again. My body wasn't flesh. It was all raw, clinging pain. "We'll have to know who started you on your little quest. Who influenced you to try to have your name changed?" I said, "I don't understand what you're talking about." He looked patient, smilingly patient. "It's rather obvious, you know. You wouldn't have acted as you did purely on your own impulses. I know that because I sibed you for a master file after I saw the report of arrest. Up until 2 days ago, your actions have always been satisfactorily conformal. A man doesn't change overnight like that without some sort of external influence." "But there wasn't any," I protested. "I mean, nobody told me to do anything. Nobody real." He chuckled. "Come now, you don't expect me to believe that, do you? After all, I deal with cases like this quite often. You're not the only one who has tried to upset the efficiency of the state. There's a pattern in these things, my friend. Almost invariably, we found that a deliberate influence has gone to work on your infractor. There's a dangerous organized underground movement that spends its time bringing these things about. One of its members unquestionably contacted you, suggested that you take the steps that you've taken. Now then, who was it?" "Nobody." I looked blank because I felt blank. The chief sighed. "You've changed more than I thought. Probably you're emotionally angry with the state now after that little interview with the deacons. That's understandable. But you'll have to come back to your senses. Let's put it this way, old man. If I don't get this information from you now, the deacons will. Listen, I said. What I'm telling you is the truth. There was nobody who told me to do anything. There was a kind of voice that used to come into my dreams. A woman's voice. It suggested in my dreams that I go ahead and try to get my name changed, that's all. He wasn't smiling anymore. Do you really expect me to believe that? It's a truth. I tell you, it's a truth. Perhaps whoever influenced you did it subtly. Perhaps you never even realized it. Think back now. Who helped you? Who departed from standard and give you any kind of aid? Realization came like a cold wash. There had been help. Lara. She had gone out of her way back there and in an eye. She'd been warm and real, and she had dropped the mask of efficiency. Could it have been with a purpose? No matter. Guilty or innocent. If I mentioned her name, she'd be interviewed. I didn't want that to happen to Lara. I shook my head and said, No one helped me. I did it all myself. You've got to believe that. I don't, said the chief and got up. He looked at me for just a moment before he turned away. He said, The boys will be able to have their fun after all. I suppose it's just as well. It keeps their morale up to be able to interview somebody once in a while. No, you can't. You can't send them in here again, I shouted without meaning to. I struggled to rise and found that I was strapped to the table. No, no! He was standing at the doorway to the room. He held a key box oscillator in his hand, and I knew that a force screen held me in the cubicle here, and that without a key box, I could beat my head forever against that invisible barrier and never pass through that doorway. He said, I'll give you 1 hour to decide and I'll be back. I'll ask you if you're ready to talk, and if you aren't, well, you'll talk to the deacons instead of me. The key box hummed, and he walked through the doorway and turned and disappeared. I stared after him and fought back my sudden nausea. How long, then? Lying there before a key box hummed again? I didn't know. My time sense had been dulled. Even the pain was dull now. It was something that had always existed. I looked at the shining ceiling. The glow lights began to dim, and I suppose that since my arrest in the park the other day, another day had passed. Most of all, I wondered, something had happened to me. Something that I could almost feel as a physical change, but I didn't quite know what it was. I knew its results. I knew that I was no longer standard, no longer conformal, no longer well-behaved and moral and efficient, a useful citizen of the state. I hated the state. I hated all states. I hated all efficiency and common sense and hate. It suddenly came to me that I didn't care whether I was in Southern or Northern, or which of them ruled the world, and I lay there. And presently a key box hummed, and I didn't even look that way. The stink of my own burning flesh still clung to my nostrils. The dull pain was still with me, and I didn't care. It was too much. When horror becomes too great, it stops being horror. The mind is smart. It doesn't believe. It doesn't register. The curve of sensation flattens out, stops almost. When such horror looms, you go on doing whatever you're doing. I was lying there. So I went on lying there. Don't speak, whispered a voice. Don't ask questions. Something fumbled at the straps. I turned my head, and 2 people were in the room. They were thin, and their eyes were overlarge, and they were naked, and covered with bruises. The fugitives of the park last night. "What are you doing here?" Finger to the lips. That was the man. He was taking the straps from my legs. The woman was releasing my arms and shoulders. "But shh!" That was the woman. In a moment they had me free. I started confidently to rise, and the pain streaked through me like a powder rocket. They helped me. I stood there, amazed that I could stand. They helped me go forward. I took several dizzy steps, and after that it wasn't as bad. We moved through the doorway. There was no force screen. The man held the key box. He pressed it as we moved away to bring the force screen into place once more. I said, "Where are we?" I was shushed again. We went on through the corridors, dead oyster-white corridors. I walked as through a sea of marshmallow. Time sense was gone again, and we were pushing on, and there was no end in sight, and we had already forgotten the beginning. We took an automatic shaft to another level and walked more corridors. Once we passed an opening, and tunnel cars filled with people roared past. I had a flash glimpse of them. They sat there, staring straight ahead, wearing the efficient expressions of good workers, state corpses. Suddenly we emerged into the dark. It was the dark of night, but after the tunnels it was practically sunrise. The air was clean. No, it was not actually as clean as the conditioned air below. It was more than clean. It was alive. We were on the edge of a great concrete paved area. About 100 yards ahead, a massive, shining, fat needle rose into the air and squatted there against the stars. It was a spaceship in its launching cradle. There were low buildings near it, a few floodlights, and people standing around. It took a moment to realize that the men walking up and down and along the groups of people, the men with rifles on their shoulders, were guards. "Luck, now, that's all we need, a little luck," said the thin man beside me. It was the first time I had heard his voice. It was a low voice. He spoke with emotion. It was not approved standard. The woman moved beside him and put her hand upon his arm. I said, "May I talk now?" He turned to me smiling. The smile had something of that sadness I had first noticed when we sat a prisoner in the jetcopter. "You want an explanation, don't you?" "Of course you do, but I'm afraid I can't tell you very much, except that we were sent to get you." "Sent? By whom? How do you have a key box and—" He laughed. "Wait, one question at a time. I was a force screen technician before we were arrested. Cells are the same everywhere. I know how to short the screens out from the inside. It's troublesome, but it can be done. That's how we escaped the first time. Then they discovered that we were gone and they chased us, and you gave us our second chance. We came here to the rendezvous. There were 6 here, including our elected leader. When we told the leader what happened, she arranged for us to return to find you and help you escape. It wasn't any problem to lift a key box from the rack where they're usually kept. I felt as though I'd been put upon the end of a huge oscillating spring. I said, "The leader? She?" "You'll meet her," he said. "After blast-off, you'll meet her. Right now our problem is to slip in among those prisoners without being seen." "Among the prisoners?" "Haven't time to explain more. You'll have to trust us. Unless you want to stay here and have the deacons hunt you till they find you." He was right. Wherever I was going, I had to go. I couldn't go back now, ever. I said, "I trust you. Let's go." Slipping in wasn't really difficult. There were only 1 or 2 guards for each group of prisoners, and they were looking for someone to escape, not to join the flock. Some of the prisoners were dressed and some were naked. Some looked bruised and beaten. but some did not. It all depended on whether they'd been questioned. They all looked dull-eyed and resigned. They paid remarkably little attention as we moved in among them and stood there. The guards began to call out orders presently, and the groups shuffled forward, and then single lines moved up the ramp and into the spaceship. The thin man and his woman were still with me. "They don't bother to count," he whispered, "so we won't be noticed." I wanted to ask him other questions, but we were divided into groups, and they weren't in mine. Minutes later I found myself in the vast hall, sitting on one of the tiers that hold the seats vertical when the ship is tail-base for blastoff. It was very dim here, and I couldn't readily make out the faces of the people on the same tier with me. A loudspeaker came to life, a deep, impersonal voice. "Fasten your webbings carefully." I did that and heard the rustling sounds about me as the others did it too. "Stand by for blastoff." There was a dead pause, then a sudden low throbbing roar, and the feeling of life in the floor plates and the bulkheads. I felt the slightest weight of pressure against the seat, and the seat began to tilt slightly. Suddenly a soft voice on my left spoke. "We're on our way. They can't stop us now, can they?" It was the same low, provocative woman's voice that I had heard in my dreams. I whirled my head. I could see only the shape of flowing hair, no features. "Who are you?" She laughed. "No wonder you don't recognize me. The natural voice is different than approved standard, isn't it? Listen. Do you remember this?" The head cocked to one side, and a crisp, formal voice came out. "Information you desire is in Bank 29. "Lara," I said. I pushed toward her, but the webbing held me back. "Yes, it's I. And we're together now. And we'll have a long, long time to find about each other. It's 10 weeks to Mars." I ran my hand over my forehead. "I don't get it. I don't get any of it. Your voice, I mean your real voice, not the standard one. I dreamed about it, and I know." I could see her nod. "It wasn't a dream, though. I was talking to you, each time. That was the way we planned it from the beginning." "Talking to me? But how? Through the sleep learner?" "No. We'd never have been able to arrange that. It was through your identity tag, which would almost always be in contact with your skin when you slept. It has a microscopic electrical circuit, both between its metal halves and painted on its surface. The same principle as the sleep learner, tactile induction, and of course, a highly selective one-channel receiver. All I needed to do was put my transmitter on that same frequency." I shook my head. "I follow, I guess, but I'm still baffled. Why all this? When did—" "Wait for me to finish," she said. "We've been organized and underground just as the deacons suspect for some time. One of our members worked on the identity tags, and when renumbering came about, it was a perfect opportunity to plant the receivers. We picked our people carefully. We picked doctors and hydroponic experts and chemists and rocket pilots. And we picked you because of your knowledge of space drive theory. Someday we'll go on to the stars. Someday you'll help us do that. Anyway, all these people we have picked, or most of them, are joining us on Mars. There's where mankind will begin again, while Northam and Southam sit upon Earth and glare at each other across the equator and wait for war. But Mars, there's an equator there, too." She laughed. Northern and Southern prisoners there mingle all the time. There aren't enough guards to notice it or stop it if they did notice it. There have even been hundreds of intermarriages. Marriages? You mean like pre-atomics? Exactly. But we'll get to that later. We needed you for our colony, only it wasn't likely that you'd infract all by yourself. You were too standard, too adjusted. We had to give you something to shake you out of it, to make you realize that the security of the state was not security, but slavery. And so one of our members in the Renumbering Bureau arranged for you to have that 4-letter word of yours for a name. One thing led to another then, not always exactly as we planned it, but always in the same general direction. Our whole plan nearly failed when the deacons nabbed you in the park. Fortunately, I'd come along to stow away on this trip, and I sent those others back after you. But what if I'd actually managed to get my name changed? The ship was swaying now, balanced on its rocket trail. The acceleration was increasing. The seat was swinging back. The roar was becoming louder. It was unlikely enough to take a chance on it. We felt at the very least you'd be kept on MP status, and then we would work on you some more until you infracted and got sent to Marskull as a nonconform. Funny, that seems a terrible fate to most people. Actually, it's the only escape. From what I hear of Mars, we'll like it there. I was recovering a little now, and I dared to say, if you're there too, I know I'll like it. I know that. Oh, you like other things. You'll like everything. And on Mars, they'll call you by your present name if you wish, and no one will be at all shocked by it. There was a slight pause, and then she said, in fact, it's a very nice name. I wouldn't mind having it myself. Is that what the pre-atomics called a proposal? She laughed. I'm not sure, but at least we have 10 weeks to talk it over. And then the acceleration pressed hard, and the gray curtain began to come, and I knew that when it was lifted, we would be on our way through space. I thought in that moment of the name that had brought all this about, the unspeakable 4-letter word that no conformist would ever dare voice or even think of, the word, the dangerous word, inimical to all that the warring, efficient state meant and stood for. The word, I realized, that eventually would destroy all that. I dared to say it now. I spelled it out first, and then I pronounced it, just loud enough for Lara to hear above the growing roar. L-O-V-E, I said. Love. I heard Lara repeat it before the momentary blackout came. Well, that's the end of that book. It wasn't very large. 688 pages, it says, on the Gutenberg Press. However, we have to remember that those are web pages, and sometimes it's just a little bit difficult to judge. I thought I was about half through when I finished part 1, but apparently I was like 3/4. Anyway, that's the end of this story. I don't know yet if there's any more. And I thank you all for listening, and I'll see y'all later. Bye now.